What causes the sexual objectification of women? Sexual objectification of women can be defined as reducing women to that of an object which is used primarily for men's consumption. Past research has linked the sexual objectification of women to sexual violence. And this is really interesting and sparked a huge amount of interest because sexual violence is a huge problem in the world today. We've had big cases such as the Larry Nassar case, who was a doctor on the American gymnast team. He sexually abused over 150 women and girls. And then we've also got a fantastic Stanford swimmer who sexually abused a woman when she was unconscious. So what makes men think that women are here just for their consumption? What makes them think they're objects? Well, some research has said that it's pornography. You can access porn on the internet or in magazines. It's pretty prevalent everywhere. Internet has a huge impact on us being able to access it easily. Other studies have said that perhaps social media platforms such as Facebook or Instagram have had an influence on how women are sexually objectified. You watch people and see people putting sexual images up and waiting to have their likes and be rated by their peers. And then another study has said perhaps our peers have a significant influence on our relationship of objectifying women. Next, perhaps masculine norms, conformity to masculine norms such as men should dominate over women, or we should take control, or violence is okay in some circumstances to sort conflicts with women. Perhaps this has an influence on sexually objectifying women. A study which encompasses all these things was written by Mikulski and Szymanski at the University of Tennessee in 2016. It's called Masculine Norms, Peer Group, Pornography, Facebook, and Men's Sexual Objectification of Women. How they did this study. So, the two hypotheses. Hypothesis 1. More masculine men were more likely to sexually objectify women. Secondly, this relationship can be exacerbated by Facebook use, pornography use, and association with abusive male peers. How they did the study? So like we have here at Harvard in the psychology department, there's an online research pool. And you can enter it and get course credit for taking surveys and contributing to the psychology department's research. So members of the university accessed the study pool, and then they took a questionnaire which took about 45 to 60 minutes. 329 males did the study, and they were all aged between 18 and 31. Primary age was 19. They were all heterosexual. Demographics, 75% of them were white, 12% of them were black, 8% Asian, and 3% were Latino or other race. The questionnaire addressed these things. 1. Conformity to masculine norms. 2. Association with abusive male peers. Pornography use, Facebook use, and sexual objectification of women. And now I'll tell you how they measured those things. Conformity to masculine norms was measured using the Conformity to Masculine Norms Inventory 46. This is a list of 46 questions, and they asked things such as, is violence acceptable? Another one is, if I could, I would frequently change sexual partners. This question addressed the masculine norm of playboy, which is basically promiscuity. And then another question that the study really addressed was power over women, and they used this question to pervade that. Things tend to be better when men are in charge. And then they also looked at conformity to violence. Violence is okay, is sometimes necessary. Students were asked to rate this on a scale of 1 to 4. 1, strongly disagree, to 4, strongly agree. Next, association with abusive male peers was measured by asking 3 questions about their friends. How many of their friends had physically abused or used force towards their girlfriends? How many of them had forcefully made unwanted sexual advances towards girlfriends or partners? And how many of them had insulted or sworn or withheld affection from their girlfriends or partners? And this was scaled on 1 to 5, 5 being more than 10 of your friends had engaged in these activities. The mean score was 1.36, meaning about 1 to 2 of their friends had engaged in these activities. Next, pornography use was used using this scale. So it's just a number of questions which asked, do you ever watch porn in magazines, or in movies, or access it via porn or the internet? And it goes into more detail how frequently, so per week, or per month, or how many hours per day, or per use. The maximum score you could get was 4.86, which basically said you watch porn every single day, you watch it for more than 90 minutes every day. 0 was you don't watch it at all. Facebook use, pretty simple. They used Facebook questionnaire, which just said, I send messages to friends, how often? Max was many times a day, 0 was none. Sexual objectification of women was split into 2 categories, via body evaluations, how much you assess the woman's body, and then by how often you made unwanted sexual advances. This was done using this survey, and they answered questions, all these questions. For example, one of the questions was, how often have you grabbed or pinched a woman's private areas against her will? And this was again responded with a scale of 1 to 5. 1 meant you never did it, 5 meant you always did it. So the results. So the first hypothesis was supported by the results. What we found is that all 3 masculine norms, playboy, power of a woman, and violence, were significantly associated with more body evaluation, with a p-value of less than 0.5. In addition, playboy and power of a woman were significantly associated with making more unwanted sexual advances towards women, with a p-value of 0.05. So this strongly supports the first hypothesis. Now, this is a summary of the moderator hypothesis, which I'm going to go into more detail, but I just want to have it on one slide so you can see it all there for future reference. So, association with abusive male peers. Did this have an impact on the relationship between masculine norms and sexually objectifying women? Yes, it seemed to do. So firstly, playboy, conformity to power of a woman, and making unwanted sexual advances. So what you see from this graph is the x-axis is the scores we got for power of a woman. 0, 0 indicates the mean, which was 1.94 out of 4. And then you have the standard deviation each side of it, which was 0.5. And then the y-axis is how often they made unwanted sexual advances. So what you see is that those men who were highly associated with abusive male peers and had higher conformity to power of a woman were far more likely to make unwanted sexual advances than an individual who did not have abusive male peers. P-value is 0.005. So this suggests that your peer group really has, or your friends really have an impact on you making unwanted sexual advances. Secondly, playboy nature, so conformity to playboy. At high levels of conformity to playboy, those who were surrounded with abusive male peers were far more likely to make unwanted sexual advances compared to those who were not surrounded by abusive male peers. P-value 0.03 for a high association of peer abuse, and p-value of 0.12 not significant for those with low peer abuse. Finally, conformity to violence. So this graph shows that everyone who might not really accept that violence is acceptable, on an individual level, they're far less likely to make unwanted sexual advances. But when they're surrounded by a group of males who are pretty abusive, they're far more likely to make unwanted sexual advances. P-value 0.03 for high peer abuse, p-value 0.448 for low peer abuse. Very insignificant. Now, this just suggests that you should really choose your friends wisely, perhaps, because your peers do seem to have a significant influence on you making unwanted sexual advances towards women. Finally, pornography. This was associated with making unwanted sexual advances and body evaluation, the regressional analysis. The beta value of 0.3 for making more body evaluation, and beta value of 0.12 for making unwanted sexual advances. So it shows that pornography did really influence the sexual objectification of women amongst men. Next, Facebook use was actually highly associated with making unwanted sexual advances. Beta value is 0.16, the star indicates that p-value is less than 0.05, which I thought was pretty interesting. If anything, I thought Facebook would be associated with making more body evaluation. So this was an interesting part of the study. So what can we take from the study? So it does seem that our media around us, either pornography, does have a significant impact on men's sexual objectification of women. We saw that through pornography use and Facebook use. And it also added something really interesting to this research area, that your peers can have a significant influence on how you, on your likelihood to sexually objectify women, in particular make unwanted sexual advances towards women. So perhaps you might take away from this, girls, you might say, oh, who's my boyfriend friends with? Because they might have a big impact on his actions. And boys, you might think, well, being in a huge group of guys, you really kind of need to hold your own and keep to your beliefs. Evolutionary, what does this mean? Well, using visual cues to assess your mate, potential mate, it's always been part of our evolution and other primates. So perhaps it's natural. But if you think of it like sugar, so sexual images like sugar. Sugar is great, we love it, and back in the day it wasn't so prevalent, so whenever we have it, we lap it up right now. Maybe that's the same with sexually explicit material, that it wasn't so accessible back in the day, but now it is, and we love to see it apparently. But having too much sugar can lead to diseases such as type 2 diabetes and heart disease. Perhaps there's negative health impacts from having too much sexually explicit material too. For example, if kids are learning from pornography use, as we saw in the New York Times article the other week, does that have a negative impact on our sexuality and sex education? Now, I will point out that this study was cross-sectional, so we cannot say causation, we can only say correlation. So we need to have experimental studies to really prove that sexual objectification of women can be caused from sexualized media or Facebook or having traditional masculine norms. And also the questionnaire was self-reported. The males, they could be biased, and when answering, oh, how often do your friends sexually abuse women? They may be less likely to say, oh, they do it all the time, if they do. And that is it. Thank you.
Good job! All right.